Welcome to the Sacramento Dugout Show. I'm Todd Sullivan, along here with Donte Morris. And tonight we have a very special guest, City Councilman member Alan Warren. Thank you, sir, for coming on our show.
Happy to be here.
Hey, we got a lot to talk about tonight, but
Yeah.
this is baseball-specific show, and since
Sure.
you're a 916 guy, we just want to talk about how, your career, how you went to Grant High School, but it wasn't just baseball. You were a three-sport athlete, my friend.
Absolutely. Well, when I was growing up, it was all about sports. I mean, we played the sport of the season. So it was football and football season and basketball and then baseball. And we just did that year round. And then if we had a little extra time, we'd run track sometimes.
Okay.
So, but it was primarily, just whatever the sport was during the season.
Since you played all three sports, what kind of made you stick with baseball? You played all three, but what made you want to go with baseball?
I grew up as a kind of a baseball family. My father loved baseball, loved Jackie Robinson, loved the Dodgers.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up being a Dodger fan. And I really just took to baseball. My father would say things like, son, you're probably not going to be like 6'2". My father was like 5'9". And he was saying, so baseball is the kind of sport you can play regardless of size,
Right.
And you're athletic. Even though I was a pretty good football player, I started in all the sports. And at Grant, I went to Grant High School, and when I was a senior, we were the #1 high school basketball team in the city, #1 football team in the city, and the #1 baseball team in the city. So that was a big thing, to go to Grant and be able to play 3 sports and to be a starter and a player. And so, but baseball, I love baseball. I probably loved it a little too much because I played every position. I pitched, I could catch, and I played shortstop, second base, first, third, outfield. I ended up signing with the New York Yankees as an outfielder. But, when I was growing up, I would just go wherever the team needed me to play. And we had tremendous baseball players at Grant High School. Guys that got drafted. Ricky Jordan went to the major leagues and had a 10-year career. But we had probably 6 or 7 guys that all could have made it.
Now, back then, when sports were more seasonal and not year-round like they are today, when Grant was dominating back when they did in the 80s, Sac High was a pretty dominating school too, so I bet you there were some pretty competitive games right back then.
Well, let me tell you, so Sac High was a good school.
Yeah.
Not dominating, but they were a good school. I can tell you in basketball, though, Kevin Johnson was coming into his own. He was a junior when I was a senior, and so you could really see that basketball program was coming, and Kevin was a tremendous basketball player, very competitive, and a good baseball player as well.
Absolutely.
But Sac High was good. The schools that we really focused on really trying to beat were schools like Cordova. Rancho Cordova was a powerhouse back then. Some of the other schools, San Juan had a good baseball team. Christian Brothers had a pretty good baseball team. Burbank had a lot of great athletes.
Absolutely.
And so there were a number of schools that had great athletes. But in terms of, Grant was kind of feared, if you will, in all the sports at that time. And we wore that as a sign of pride. We liked people coming into our neighborhood and being a little concerned about playing us. But it was a different era. And it was, before kids had all these games they can play on TV and the video games and all that keep them away from going outside and really being on the field.
Speaking of the era, speaking about the times, you grew up at a time where you go outside, you play ball, you play sports at different seasons. How do you feel about the landscape of baseball now, where it's more specialized, everybody have a trainer, you play one sport throughout the year and you kind of focus on a skill set as opposed to just going out there and play? What's your idea of this?
It's become more of an institutional type funnel for business.
Okay.
Because there's so much at stake now. Even a scholarship, a scholarship could be worth $250,000 or more, depending on where you go to school.
Right. So
these parents are really trying to focus in and get their kids prepared to either get a scholarship or get drafted. Now you're talking about, this could be hundreds of millions of dollars in baseball to get drafted and then have a career in baseball. And so, we played because we loved it. It was fun. you know, I would have played for free.
Yep.
You know, I mean, I played through injuries. You know, we were talking earlier. I tore my rotator cuff. You know, I've had 3-4 ankle surgeries. You know, even before I signed a professional contract, I was already had injuries that ultimately led to these surgeries. But we did it because we loved it. You know, now I think the young people do love it as well, but at some point they start to think about these other things, and I think it's changed the game in that way. Like you talked about with trainers, you know, specializing in one sport. You know, knowing what I know now, I probably would have specialized in baseball and just focused on it. You know, refined the skill and, you know, off to the next level.
Yeah, the one thing that I really miss, you know, back growing up, because we grew up in the same time. I know back in the Lamb Park days, and also dealing when Willow Rancho was a big
Willow
time.
Rancho was a good program.
It was one of the best programs around.
Good little
you know?
league program,
and a lot of good people came out of there. But it was like, you know, your Sandlot days. You can always, you know, back on a Saturday or Sunday, you can find, you know, the neighborhood kids playing a football game, playing a basketball game, playing a baseball game. The fields were constantly full on weekends. Now I drive through my neighborhood, I drive around the town, and baseball fields are empties with, you know, weeds. You know, the basketball courts are empties. You know, Dominic and Donte, they've been working with hoop maps, so they've been filling in that area and that void. You know, in baseball too, it's just, you know, like the Sunday morning games where you just go out and have some fun. You just don't see that anymore.
Well, I think the kids are, or at least the kids who have been identified as players, are concerned about being injured. They have regimens, they have coaches and structures and schedules of things they need to do. The other thing is that it's become very expensive. You know, baseball is a sport now where you gotta, you know, I was talking to some friends of mine. They say, well, you know, on this particular team or on a number of teams, you can't wear the same helmet as another player. So every player has to have their own helmet.
That's crazy.
Can't use their bats. Every player has to have their own bats. When I played, man, we had 5 helmets.
All sweaty and
Right,
everything.
yeah, 5. Somebody else. So I used to wear my baseball hat and keep it on and then put the helmet over the top, because if you didn't, man, it'd be like just sweat from 9 other guys. Man,
if
all
one
over
bat
the place.
somebody was getting hit with, everybody wanted to
we
use
wanted
that
to
bat.
use that bat. That's the way we played, you know. And it's just a whole different, you know, it's a different era. And I'm not saying it's wrong or bad. I'm just saying it's different. And so you have to adapt. I was talking about my youngest son earlier, who was a really good athlete, is a really good athlete, but he said, you know, look, I want to focus. And it was his choice on soccer.
Because I think now, even though it's like no pressure, but I think the way society is now, it kind of forces you to choose one sport. Because the norm, you don't really see too many two-sport athletes professionally that's doing it.
Yeah.
You had Bo Jackson, you had Deion Sanders, you know, but you don't really see people doing that at a high level. So now, in order for people to really be successful, they think at 14, 13, I got to choose a sport and I got to be good at it and I got to go down that lane.
Yeah.
And I think just the landscape, but today is different. There's a lot more to do. Like, we get on our phones, you know, there's a lot more entertainment instead of just going outside.
Different options, a lot of different options. And really, you know, in order for an athlete to be a multiple sport person, it has to be a kind of a unique situation.
Right.
You have to either be an extraordinary talent, because the coaches have to allow it. Most of the time, the coaches want you to focus on a particular sport. You know, and you have to, it has to have some value to you. You know, I mean, you spoke of Bo Jackson and Deion Sanders. I played in 1988 on a team with Deion Sanders in the Yankee farm system. And I come from a community that had tremendous athletes, but, you know, Deion was as gifted an athlete that I've ever come across. You know, I mean, his work ethic, a lot of people don't talk about that, but the guy, when we were back then, he would work out before practice and then after practice. Most of us were trying to get to the park, do our thing, and then leave. He was putting in work. And, you know, it was like cool, do your thing. We were doing, but he was serious about what he was doing. He knew, I think, at that time where he wanted to go and where he was going. Whereas a lot of us, man, I played for the fun of it.
Yep.
After it was done, I was going to do something else. But he was just a tremendous athlete. And so, people like, I met Bo Jackson a couple years ago for the first time. And Bo is a big guy, but he's not. You would think he's just this superhuman.
Yeah.
He's not. He's only maybe 6 feet tall.
Yeah.
Even now he's probably 230 pounds or something, which is big, but it's not massive.
Right.
But the dude's handshake, man. When he shook my hand, it was like he had a vice grip or some
And your
some
hand
tool.
just disappeared.
And I think he did it intentionally. He just wanted me to feel. But he grabbed my hand and just cranked down on it. And it was like, you could tell he has this inner strength, and it was, the guy was an incredible guy, man. So you have to really be unique in order to do that in this day. I think particularly at even in college or at a professional level, like, Kyler Murray was a tremendous athlete, and did it in football and in baseball. Now he's in the NFL as the #1 pick. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you gotta. You gotta be. You gotta be the stuff, man.
Your heart definitely has to be in it, and those gentlemen definitely do have heart when it comes to their sport, just like you have, heart, and you're very strong when it comes to your community.